Long before European ships sailed across the Atlantic, Venezuela was teeming with life. The land was a mosaic of ecosystems, from the dense rainforests that stretched endlessly, teeming with vibrant wildlife, to the majestic mountain ranges that stood as silent sentinels over the fertile plains below. This was a land of unparalleled natural beauty, a paradise that seemed untouched by time. Diverse indigenous groups thrived in this land of towering mountains, lush rainforests, and fertile plains. These groups, each with their own unique cultures and traditions, had adapted perfectly to their environments. They knew the secrets of the forests, the rhythms of the rivers, and the cycles of the seasons. Their knowledge of the land was profound, and it allowed them to live in harmony with nature. These communities, with names like the Carib, Arawak, and Chibcha, were the original inhabitants of this beautiful country. They had established complex societies with rich traditions and deep spiritual beliefs. Their languages, art, and music were expressions of their connection to the land and to each other. They were not just surviving, they were thriving, creating a vibrant tapestry of human life that was as diverse as the landscapes they inhabited. They lived in harmony with nature, fishing in the rivers, hunting in the forests, and cultivating crops like maize and cassava. Their agricultural practices were sustainable, ensuring that the land remained fertile for future generations. They understood the importance of balance, taking only what they needed and giving back to the earth in return. This symbiotic relationship with nature was the cornerstone of their way of life. Their lives were intertwined with the land, their traditions passed down through generations. Elders taught the young about the ways of their ancestors, ensuring that the knowledge and wisdom of the past were never lost. Through stories, songs, and rituals, they kept their heritage alive, fostering a sense of identity and continuity that bound their communities together. These early Venezuelans were skilled artisans, crafting intricate pottery, weaving colorful textiles, and creating stunning jewelry. Their craftsmanship was not just a means of survival, but a form of artistic expression. Each piece they created told a story, reflected their beliefs, and showcased their ingenuity. Their art was a testament to their creativity and their deep connection to the natural world. They were also astute astronomers, observing the stars and developing complex calendars to guide their agricultural practices. They understood the movements of celestial bodies and used this knowledge to predict the seasons, plan their planting and harvesting, and conduct their rituals. Their astronomical knowledge was a blend of science and spirituality, reflecting their belief in the interconnectedness of all things. Their societies, though diverse, were united by a deep respect for the natural world and a strong sense of community. They celebrated their connection to the earth through festivals and rituals, coming together to honor the forces that sustained them. These gatherings were not just social events, but sacred ceremonies that reinforced their bonds with each other and with the land. Life for these indigenous communities changed dramatically in the late 15th century. The arrival of Europeans marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new and challenging chapter in their history. These serene settlements that had stood for generations would soon face unprecedented upheaval. In 1498, Christopher Columbus, on his third voyage to the Americas, landed on the shores of what is now Venezuela. This momentous event was the first of many encounters that would forever alter the lives of the indigenous people. The sight of European ships on the horizon was a harbinger of change, bringing with it both opportunities and challenges. This encounter marked the beginning of a new era, one that would forever alter the course of Venezuelan history. The initial meetings between Europeans and indigenous people were filled with curiosity and caution. Maps were drawn and new territories were claimed, setting the stage for a dramatic transformation of the land and its people. The arrival of Europeans brought with it not only new technologies and ideas, but also diseases that ravaged the indigenous populations. These diseases, to which the native people had no immunity, spread rapidly, causing widespread suffering and death. The impact was devastating, leading to a dramatic decline in the indigenous population and a profound disruption of their way of life. The Spanish, driven by the promise of gold and driven by a belief in their own superiority, began to assert their dominance over the land and its people. They embarked on a relentless quest for wealth, exploiting the natural resources and subjugating the indigenous populations. The quest for gold became a driving force, leading to the establishment of colonial rule and the transformation of the social and economic landscape. A period of conquest and colonization was about to begin. The Spanish established settlements, built forts, and imposed their culture and religion on the native people. This era of colonization brought profound changes, reshaping the identity of the land and its inhabitants. The legacy of this period is still felt today, a testament to the enduring impact of those early encounters between the old world and the new. The Spanish arrived in Venezuela seeking gold and glory. Their arrival marked the beginning of a new era, one that would forever change the landscape and the lives of the people who inhabited this land. The Spanish, driven by tales of immense wealth and the promise of new territories, embarked on a journey that would lead them to the shores of Venezuela. They were not just explorers, they were conquerors, intent on claiming these lands for the Spanish crown and enriching themselves in the process. They quickly established settlements and began to exploit the land's resources. These early settlements were the foundation of what would become a sprawling colonial empire. The Spanish brought with them not only their ambitions but also their agricultural practices, which they imposed upon the fertile lands of Venezuela. They saw the potential in the rich soil and the favorable climate, and they were determined to make the most of it. The indigenous population, weakened by disease and outmatched in terms of weaponry, found themselves increasingly marginalized. The arrival of the Spanish brought with it a wave of diseases to which the indigenous people had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, and other illnesses decimated their numbers, leaving them vulnerable and unable to resist the encroaching settlers. The Spanish, with their advanced weaponry and military tactics, easily overpowered the indigenous communities, further entrenching their dominance. Spanish conquistadors, driven by ambition and greed, carved out vast estates, enslaving indigenous people to work the land. These estates, known as encomiendas, were granted to Spanish settlers as rewards for their service to the crown. The encomenderos, as they were called, had the right to extract labor and tribute from the indigenous people who were forced to toil under harsh conditions. The encomienda system was brutal and exploitative, leading to the suffering and death of countless indigenous individuals. Venezuela, unlike the gold and silver-rich empires of the Incas and Aztecs, didn't offer the same immediate riches. The Spanish were initially disappointed by the lack of precious metals, but they soon realized that the true wealth of Venezuela lay in its agricultural potential. The fertile lands and diverse ecosystems provided an opportunity to cultivate a variety of crops, which could be exported to Europe for profit. The Spanish, however, recognized the agricultural potential of the land. They introduced new farming techniques and crops, transforming the landscape and the economy of the region. The introduction of European agricultural practices led to the establishment of large plantations, which became the backbone of the colonial economy. These plantations required a significant labor force, which the Spanish sought to fulfill through the exploitation of indigenous people and later African slaves. They introduced new crops like sugarcane and coffee, transforming Venezuela into an agricultural colony. The cultivation of these crops required extensive labor and led to the establishment of a plantation economy. Sugarcane and coffee became the primary exports, driving the economic growth of the colony. The Spanish invested heavily in the development of these plantations, bringing in expertise and resources to maximize their productivity. Large plantations known as haciendas became the backbone of the colonial economy, relying heavily on forced indigenous labor. The haciendas were vast estates that produced a variety of crops for export. The labor force on these plantations was composed primarily of indigenous people who were subjected to grueling work and harsh conditions. The hacienda system entrenched social and economic inequalities, with the Spanish landowners reaping the benefits of the labor of the indigenous population. This period was a dark chapter in Venezuelan history. The exploitation and oppression of the indigenous people left a lasting impact on the social and cultural fabric of the region. The Spanish colonial rule was marked by violence, coercion, and the systematic dismantling of indigenous societies. The legacy of this period is still felt today as the descendants of the indigenous people continue to grapple with the consequences of centuries of colonial domination. The indigenous population faced brutal treatment, their cultures suppressed, their way of life disrupted. The Spanish imposed their language, religion, and customs upon the indigenous people, erasing many aspects of their traditional way of life. The forced conversion to Christianity and the destruction of indigenous religious practices were part of a broader effort to assimilate the indigenous population into the colonial society. This cultural suppression was a form of control aimed at weakening the resistance and ensuring the dominance of the Spanish colonizers. Resistance, however, was never fully extinguished. Despite the overwhelming power of the Spanish, the indigenous people continued to resist in various forms. There were numerous uprisings and rebellions led by indigenous leaders who sought to reclaim their land and their freedom. These acts of resistance were a testament to the resilience and determination of the indigenous communities who refused to be completely subjugated. Uprisings and rebellions flared up throughout the Spanish colonial period, a testament to the enduring spirit of the indigenous people. These conflicts were often brutally suppressed by the Spanish, but they served as a constant reminder that the indigenous population would not easily surrender their autonomy. The resistance movements kept the hope of freedom alive and inspired future generations to continue the struggle against colonial oppression. The Spanish, eager to solidify their control over the colony, established a rigid social hierarchy. This hierarchy was designed to maintain the dominance of the Spanish-born elites and to keep the indigenous and mixed-race populations in subordinate positions. The social structure was strictly enforced, with severe penalties for those who challenged the established order. This system of social stratification created deep divisions within the colonial society which would have lasting repercussions. At the top were the peninsulares, Spanish-born individuals who held the most power and privilege. These elites occupied the highest positions in the colonial administration and enjoyed the greatest economic benefits. They were the landowners, the merchants, and the officials who controlled the wealth and resources of the colony. Their status was a source of tension and resentment among the other social groups who were excluded from the same opportunities and privileges. Below them were the criollos, people of Spanish descent born in the Americas. Although they were of European heritage, the criollos were considered inferior to the peninsulares and were often denied the same rights and privileges. This discrimination fueled a sense of injustice and discontent among the criollos, who began to question the legitimacy of the colonial system and to seek greater autonomy and recognition. Despite their European heritage, criollos were relegated to a lower rung of the social ladder, fueling resentment towards the peninsulares. This resentment would eventually contribute to the growing movement for independence as the criollos sought to break free from the oppressive colonial system and to establish a society where they could enjoy equal rights and opportunities. The tension between the peninsulares and the criollos was a significant factor in the eventual push for independence and the reshaping of Venezuelan society. As the 18th century drew to a close, a new wind of change began to sweep across Latin America. The vast and diverse landscapes, from the Andean mountains to the Amazon rainforest, were on the brink of monumental transformation. The people, long subjected to the yoke of colonial rule, were beginning to stir with a newfound sense of purpose and identity. Inspired by the ideals of the Enlightenment and fueled by growing resentment towards colonial rule, movements for independence began to emerge. The writings of philosophers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Voltaire, which championed liberty, equality, and fraternity, resonated deeply with the oppressed populations. These ideas ignited the flames of revolution in the hearts of many. In Venezuela, a young man named Simon Bolivar would rise to lead this struggle, becoming a symbol of hope and liberation, not just for Venezuela, but for much of South America. Bolivar's vision extended beyond his homeland. He dreamed of a united Latin America, free from the chains of colonialism and capable of standing strong on the global stage. Born into a wealthy Criollo family in Caracas in 1783, Bolivar received a privileged education steeped in the writings of European Enlightenment thinkers. His upbringing in a prosperous household afforded him opportunities that many of his compatriots could only dream of. Yet, it was this very education that planted the seeds of rebellion in his mind. He was deeply affected by the ideas of liberty, equality, and self-determination, ideas that stood in stark contrast to the realities of Spanish colonial rule. The harshness and injustice of the colonial system, with its rigid class structures and exploitation, became increasingly intolerable to Bolivar as he grew older and more aware of the world around him. Bolivar's journey towards becoming the liberator was marked by both tragedy and triumph. His early travels to Europe exposed him to revolutionary ideas and the political upheavals of the time, further shaping his revolutionary fervor. However, his path was not without personal sorrow. He witnessed firsthand the brutality of Spanish oppression and experienced personal loss, including the death of his beloved wife Maria Teresa del Toro shortly after their marriage. This profound loss left a deep scar on Bolivar's heart, but it also steeled his resolve to fight for a cause greater than himself. These experiences, while painful, fueled his determination to free his homeland from colonial rule. Bolivar's charisma and unwavering commitment to the cause of independence inspired many to join him. He became a beacon of hope, rallying diverse groups of people, from indigenous communities to former slaves, to stand together against their common oppressor. In 1811, Venezuela declared its independence from Spain, igniting a fierce war that would rage for over a decade. The struggle for freedom was arduous and fraught with challenges. The Spanish forces, determined to maintain their grip on the colonies, fought back with brutal force, leading to numerous battles and significant loss of life. Bolivar, a gifted military strategist and charismatic leader, rallied people from all walks of life to the cause of independence. His ability to inspire and unite a diverse coalition was crucial to the revolutionary efforts. He understood that the strength of their movement lay in their unity and shared vision for a free and just society. His armies, often outnumbered and outgunned, fought bravely against the Spanish forces, securing crucial victories in battles like Boyaca in 1819 and Carabobo in 1821. These victories were not just military triumphs, they were symbolic of the indomitable spirit of the people and their unyielding desire for freedom. Bolivar's leadership and the sacrifices of countless revolutionaries paved the way for the eventual liberation of several South American nations.